Welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm Adolf Hillary Topel from the Vision Helpdesk team. The topic for today's webinar is release and deployment management. So let's see what are we going to cover in today's webinar. So we'll see the following. What are we going to cover? So in this webinar, we shall learn what is release management, how to add a release request, what is inside the release request, how using the dashboard and the calendar for release management, the ITIL automation for release management, and we'll see about reports and the custom reports for release management. Now in release management, before we go to release management, let's define what is a release. So a release is a collection of hardware, software, documentation, processes or other components that are required for to implement one or more approved changes to the IT services. Now let's see what is release management. Well, release management, it is a process where you can manage, you can plan, and you can schedule, and you can control from where the software, let's say it's built through different stages and different environments. So that includes also testing and the final deployment of the software. So basically release management, this is a process in which the software, right from the planning stage to the stage in which it gets implemented. So the entire process, that is known as the release management. Now let's take some examples of release management. Now there are different stages in which this release management is carried out. Now let's take an example where a launch of a new car. So right from the idea, the concept is created and the idea, it has to be approved. So once that idea is approved, then that idea is carried forward, and you need to have a plan. You need to design the structure of the car. From all those teams who approve it, it goes to the next team who's going to get that release, that particular car, that launch to be moved forward. So then you have to have it built, so the different configurations and the different specifications that are there, for example in the car, the type of the engine, the build quality, so all that will matter, and then it will be checked. Then further on there would be rigorous testing, where they could have, say, for a certain number of kilometers that particular car is tested, and finally when they get the results, if everything is approved, it will move forward to the rollout plan, or else any changes or any corrections has to be made, that will be done and corrected properly, and finally when it is ready, it will be launched. Another example can be a release of a movie, where the first part of the movie had come, then a new part would come. So any new part which comes, let's say, it has to be better than the previous one. Also in the software, so when you have software releases, so you might have intermediate version releases in a software. Now for example, the software 5.3.0, this is an intermediate release. So this would have bugs fixed from the previous version. It would have certain enhancements in the features. So any version that comes out, it has to be better, enhanced, and bug free from the previous version. Now let's see how can we add a release request. Now you need to log in to your managed portal, and you must log in as an administrator. Now to add a release request, you need to go to this module, that is the release module. Now before going over there, before you add a release, first you need to go to the admin settings. You need to come under users. So there's an option of role. So first you need to check in this role whether you have given yourself proper permissions. For example, there is a role where you can create of a release management. Now if you scroll in this role below in this role over here, when you come to this option where you find like the ITIL modules like problem management, change management, here in this release management you have this option where you can give yourself the desired access. For example, you check this and you tick all this and then you click on this update option. So once you have defined and given yourself proper access in that role, then you can come to this release module. Now here you can add a release. Now to add a release, you need to click on this drop down and just click on this add release. So over here, once you're in the add release, so here you need to define under which domain you want to add this release, and you can give the title for the release. For example, version 5, and here you can define the description of the release. Now here, as you can see, these are dynamic fields. Now here you can define when is the planned start date and the end date. Here you can select the status of the release. You can define the priority for this release, whether it's high, medium or critical. Here you can define what type of release it is. Is it a minor release? Is it a standard release? Is it a major release? You can define the type of release. Then also the impact which it has on the business, whether it affects the user or a group or the entire business. You can also define the risk associated with this. So all these fields you can define, and once you do that, here you can define the request user. Here you can also attach an asset. So here you can go to this configuration item and you can attach an asset if this asset is released to this, if this asset and this release, they are linked. You can also assign it to a particular team, or you can assign it to a particular staff member, and just click on this add option. So once you do that, you can find the release would be added in the system. Now if you click on this release option over here, which has been added, now as you can see on this left hand panel, here you can find the details of this release, under which domain this release belongs, what is the status, what is the priority of this release, the impact, the risk, all the details you can find over here on this left hand panel. Now coming to this release over here, as you can see there are different tabs. So now this is the timeline in which you can find stages like the release management support stage, then release planning, the build and the deployment, the early life support or monitoring, and the release closure. So the release would pass through different stages till it reaches this release closure stage. Now if you click on the release management support, you can see like who's requested this, the user, the description you can find over here. Now you can find over here different roles, like say the release manager, the creator of this release, the assigned staff. So you can fill all this information and you will find it over here. Then in the release planning stage, here you can find the description, here you can find also the planning and the scheduling manager, and is there any risk associated with this release, what is the date of deployment, what is the strategy for this deployment. So it would go through all these stages. Then you have the release build, where you can have a build plan and a test plan. You can also take approvals. Then the release would move to the release deployment, where you could check if there is any disruption or changes meant in this release. So you can add all those details over here, the deployment details that can be added over here. So this is when the release would be deployed deployment state would start over here. Now, after the release is deployed, so you go to monitor that release. That is the early live support or monitoring that has been done. So if there is any deviation, so that can be corrected. And if everything works favorably, so finally the release has to be closed. So the release closure details and the release is closed. Now if we scroll above, here we can, in this next tab, that is the release details tab, you would get all the details of this release, the description, the build plan, the test plan. So you get all the release details here. Then you can click on this audit log option, where you can come to know what changes has been done on this release, the activities that has been performed on the release, right from the date when it was created to this latest activity. Now here, as you can see, there are options. If you click on this drop down, you can add a note to this release. You can link this release to a configuration item and asset from here. You can link it to an incident. You can link it to a change. You can add a task. You can also request for approval. If you can click on these tabs here, you would find, if it's linked to an incident, you would find it here. Any approvals, you could get it here under this approvals tab, and so on. Now if you click on this home page over here, there's also an option where you could perform some mass operations on this release, where if you want to change the properties of release, so you could change certain properties, like the release type can be changed directly from here. You can change the priority, the status. This can be updated using this option. Now let's see in the dashboard and the calendar how it's used in this release management. If you come in this home option, here you can find the dashboard. Now in this dashboard, as you can see, there are different modules, and in the modules you can get an overall of that particular module. Like for example, if you click on this release module, here you would find the number of new releases, what is overdue, what is assigned. You can find those details over here. Now if you click on this option, these are the approvals and this is the calendar. So if you click on that calendar option, here you could find a calendar view, and in this calendar, let's say for example on this particular day, if there is anything, any releases there, you could find it. So if you click on that particular day, you would get all the details of that day. Now here, as you can see, there are releases that is present for this particular date. Similarly, if you can change this view and you do list view, so there also you would find the details that for today. The next we'll see the ITIL automation for release management. So here you could perform certain automated actions using the ITIL automation on the release. So you need to come to this manage portal, log in as the administrator in the admin settings. So you need to go to the admin settings, need to come to the automations, and in this automation, here you could find the ITIL automation. So click on the ITIL automation. Now here you could perform a desired action based on the events criteria. You could take a desired action. Now to add in you need to add the ITIL automation, clicking this option. So you can click on this option, and here you could add based on the events, based on the criteria, and here you could take the desired action. So you can click. Now this is the one which I've already created. Now as you can see, you can give the title for the action you want to perform. Here you can give the title for this. Then in the event, you could select, let's say whenever a new release is created, so in that event you are selecting the criteria in the match conditions, like let's say if the priority equals to critical and the release type equals to major release. Now in this case, you want it to be assigned directly to one of your staff members, or you want to forward an alert template to a particular email ID of the staff, so you can do that. Similarly, if you want to change the status, the impact, that can also be done in this actions. And if you want to send this for approval for changes, so that can also be defined over here to which stuff you want to do. So you can send it and just click on this update. So you'll be creating an ITL automation where you can take a desired action using this. Now let's see the reports that is associated with the release management. Now for reports, you need to click on the report option. Click on this reports, and here you could find the overview of reports. Now you need to come on this all report option where you click on all reports, and you can find this ITIL report, the module. Click on this ITIL. If you scroll below here, you would get all the features, all the reports that is related to the ITIL. Now you can find all releases linked to changes, different reports that are available. Now if I click on this all release option, now here you could select the duration, you could select the domain and click on this generate option. Now let's say if I want to click on this custom duration, where any 3 months duration I can select, and I can select this domain and I'll click on generate option. So it would show me the releases that is present within this duration and in this domain. Now this is the report that I've got. Now I can export this report by clicking on this export option. So I can export it in the form of a CSV file, an HTML file, or an XLS. I can also have this sent over to my email address. Now if I click on the create custom report, so here I need to click on this release option, and here there are the select date. Let's say if I'm selected from this date to this particular date, and for this domain, now there are match criterias. Now based on this, I can select the status, I can define the priority, the impact, the risk, the category, and the subcategory. So I can define that option. If I want to save this, I can also have this saved as a filter, and I click on the search option. So here I would get the reports that I'm looking for using this custom report option. So I've done with the webinar. Now you may type your questions so I can get them answered. So we have a question by Mumina, and she's asked, can I change the default properties like impact, risk type while creating a release? So yes, this is possible. Let me just show that to you. Now you need to come to the admin settings and log in as the administrator. Then you can just come to this release module over here. Now to the release that you have created, if you want to modify these properties, so that can be done since they are dynamic fields. So as you can see under this release details, you can change these fields since these are dynamic fields. Like let's say if you want to change the status, that can be changed. You want to change the impact, the priority, you can change this to the one which you want. And you can also modify the fields from these settings to the one which you want. Here you can add in the status, the priorities which you want to use. You can add it from this module properties. We have another question by Momina, and she's asked, can I archive old releases? Yes, you can do that. So for that, you need to come to the admin settings. And as you can see under the system, come to this archive option. So click on this archive. And here, as you can see, archive date before. Now, from where do you want to archive this data? So click on this drop down. You want to archive it from releases. So all the releases before this particular date you can archive, or you can click even on the statuses, whether you want to archive only closed statuses, or you can do that option from this. And you can just click on this drop down over here. You can click on this, and let's say I'm clicking and I'm clicking on this. So here you can archive all the previous releases from this option. Well, I guess there are no further questions. So thank you everyone for attending this webinar. You can contact us for any queries or questions on our email ID, that is sales@visionhelpdesk.com. You can get in touch with us on our Skype ID, that is vision.helpdesk. You can also view previous webinar recordings on our YouTube channel. Thank you everyone.